Hi everyone, so welcome to the next instalment of the Natilic Wednesday webinars, and today we are covering off the next normal and you. So this webinar is going to be an extremely informal webinar. We're just going to be talking and discussing around the challenges of what this next normal phase might look like, how technology can support you with balancing remote workforces and the potential of moving back into the office and your normal working environment. On the webinar today, I am joined by Darren Parkinson and James Hinton, and feel free to ask any questions as we go through. This, like I say, is going to be a very conversational style webinar, as we know that nothing is set in stone in these times, and we're just going to walk through some of the options and some of the innovative tech which is coming through. Okay, so today we're going to cover off a little bit of a context, so looking at, what has changed, what the impact's been, what it possibly might look like looking forward, and then diving into the future role of the office, what does next normal mean for you, and then more specifically around some of the technologies we're seeing emerge. So first of all, when we were doing a little bit of research for this, a recent stat came out from Gartner from April that 74% of companies plan to move their employees to a remote working environment permanently. Now, you've probably seen in the news that people like Google, Twitter, and quite a lot of different organisations are coming forward and actually stating that they're looking at a permanent remote working or workforce and what that actually means to their business and their business models. A phrase we heard recently was, there will no longer be remote work, there will just be work. And this is quite interesting in the fact of looking at the roles of people and their responsibilities and their output and how they all input into a team environment that, it doesn't really matter where you are now. There will no longer be remote work, it will just be work.
Yeah, I like that because for me, sort of remote work implies that there's this central place where all the real work gets done. And as a sort of a long-time home worker, it feels like hopefully those workers that are sort of new to remote working will have a bit more empathy, perhaps, for those of us that work from home a little bit more, and realise that work's not what you do. Work's what you do. It's not where you go, right? So yeah, hopefully that's going to be the case moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And when obviously everything kind of kicked off and changed come March time, we were very keen, we understood as Natilic how it was affecting us as a business, but we're lucky that we work with a whole breadth of different clients across lots of different industries that were facing different challenges. So we set up a couple of forums, and I believe there are some people on the webinar today who are part of those forums, and we asked, we had very frank conversations, what do we think this can mean? What impact is it having to your business? And some key themes came up around business performance, operational performance, and mainly quite a lot of them around people. So actually taking a bit more of an inward look about how you support, facilitate your people and your teams and how they work. And there has been a bit of a trend come out recently on like a keep the change. So there may be some things which have been highlighted or brought to life from a more permanent or like more predominant shift to remote working. One of our clients commented that with the reduction of travel and expenses and sending their teams here, there and everywhere around the company, as a business, they've really reduced their carbon footprint. And it's those kind of impacts which we might have as businesses and being conscientious, contributors to the environment and other elements which, moving forward, there may be some things we've learned and lessons we've learned that we will remain and take with us.
On the people piece that you've got there about how people will remember us during this time, I was speaking to a friend at the weekend, and she was saying how her view of her organisation had changed massively during this time because of the way that they had handled the situation. So she now has so much more respect for the organisation that she's recently joined. And she sort of wasn't really enjoying the role previous to that. But through this, it's really made a difference to her. And she's really starting to see the benefit of organisations that kind of do look after you and that kind of thing. So yeah, definitely that one. When I saw that on your slide there, it kind of resonated because of that conversation.
No, definitely. One thing as well which has come up recently, so a theme when looking at how businesses have reacted to moving to a more remote workforce, sorry, I can't get my words out, is looking at work style, workspace and workflow. And all of these are integrated and overlap very heavily. And previously, quite a lot of businesses looked at work style when they were faced with the challenge of how do they provision for like a multi-generational workforce. And now that's kind of changed to how do you provision for a multi-generational workforce alongside being multi-located, people that are used to working remotely, people who are used to being completely office-based and the hybrids out there amongst us as well. And that kind of translates into workspace. So making sure that your teams have got the right tools in front of them, that they can collaborate and they can empower themselves and they can perform to the best of their abilities, making sure that business, the processes and policies all feed into together and that their experience is spot on and suits them and the way that they work. And then it kind of goes into a workflow. So this is very prevalent at the moment in the sense that people are going to be moving around, not moving around maybe necessarily logistically, but your requirements will be, so it might be that you will have a more remote workforce and people might have to occasionally move into an office environment to perform some tasks or visit certain sites. And that kind of like dynamic agility is going to be really important, and especially when you're considering solutions to support your teams. And kind of bringing it all together really in this intelligent, seamless end-to-end solution is really important. I'm not sure if James, Dan, if you have anything to add in that kind of approach.
Yeah, I think what I'd say is you could look at the answer to the problem as from just like a desktop application perspective. But the reality is you've got more than just desktop applications to consider when you're trying to collaborate, with people who aren't in the office. You've got the mobile piece, you've also got the meeting room piece, you've got the piece where you need to collaborate securely with partners and clients, for instance. And what the best type of solutions that we found with our clients is an end-to-end sort of solution which brings all of that together rather than point solutions which address specific sort of tasks, because then you have to manage multiple points, and there's obviously multiple integrations to consider, and also security as well plays a part in that.
No, definitely. I would agree. Okay, so moving on to our next point of what we wanted to discuss today was, what is the future role of the office? And we are in a bit of a challenging time. This is probably the first time in any of our lifetimes where business has been really dictated to by an outside entity, and in this case, the government have stepped up and put in rules, regulations, guidance into how we operate as a business, how we collaborate, how we use our space. I've put up here a couple of snapshots from earlier on last week, which was on the government website. And we know that even from this point, from the 24th of June, there have been announcements and there have been changes into how we're approaching it. So the government are looking at workplaces and workstations, and also meetings is highlighted in there with some guidance of what businesses can do to provision and for the safety of their staff. But, when we look back at March and we compare it to now and comparing it to 3 months' time or 6 months' time, then it really would be a little bit different. We don't know what the environment will be like or where we might be standing. So I think it is really important that how we may provision today may not necessarily be how we look to provision next week, 2 weeks' time, a month's time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read some of those guidelines as well, and I was looking at some of them, and that 3.4 actually goes on to sort of say, I've got it here. It says use remote working tools to avoid in-person meetings. And I was speaking to the team about it, and one of them sort of said, well, if I had to go to the office and have a meeting with people and we all have to wear masks, for example, then I'd rather just stay at home and have a video call rather than sort of actually be in the office. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it depends on what those, what the guidelines are at any given time, right? So that's really interesting. And then it went on to sort of talk about providing clear and regular communication. And immediately that got me to thinking about the digital signage that we have around the office as well. So things like App Space, where we're using that digital signage to sort of notify people of what's going on. And the great thing about that is rather than having these static posters and things that you're sort of seeing pop up, is when those rules change, we can dynamically change those. So when it goes from 2 meters to 1 meter plus and it gets a little bit confusing, we can start, changing those signs appropriately, and even to the point where you could start to see hotspots and maybe redirecting people to go to different places or something, or say, this floor's full or something, and maybe go somewhere else, and those kind of things. So just being able to use that digital signage intelligently as part of the overall solution that James was talking about there.
Yeah, and I think also we have to remember that this is not just a consideration of one person within the organisation. It stretches across different teams, the HR teams, the facilities teams, the IT teams, all working together to create the solutions which work for the business.
Yep.
But obviously that is going to be different for everybody. What might fit for us here at Natilic may not fit for our clients, and the whole next normal, it really is unique to how your business operates and what the needs of your people and your teams are. It could range completely from companies like Twitter saying we're going to go for 100% remote workforce. It could be that you apply new policies and procedures and say, actually, video conferencing comes first. If you have to have a meeting, it has to be over video unless for certain specific, isolated incidents. It might be that as a business that your culture is very much connected to your sense of place, and you're going to do everything you can to accelerate getting people safely back into the office. It really will be a real mix of different landscapes and environments that we will kind of see.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that was interesting that I was reading about was somebody was saying how even when we go back to the office, a lot of the calls and meetings we'll have will be remote meetings. So suddenly the office space becomes a noisier environment as well, which is something to sort of consider. And yes, so many points you got on that slide there that I had so many notes about, just in terms of just thinking twice perhaps about expanding office space and those kind of things, and maybe just reusing that budget to perhaps spend on video equipment for the home worker, and maybe having different tiers of home worker, which is something James and I have talked about in the past, and just sort of giving different levels of equipment to those people rather than perhaps expanding the office space, those kind of things. So yeah, lots to talk about on that particular slide.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, go. And I was just going to say, we've seen like over the years consumerization of IT, and it kind of I feel like actually now with post COVID-19, it's kind of business coming into the home environment back the other way to create the best collaborative experiences for home users.
Definitely. I think it is making sure that everybody's experience is at the top of its game. You don't want to feel that you're compromising on your collaborative experience by being at home or being in the office. Yeah. So these are a couple of things which really kind of shouted out. Cisco actually, one of our partners, was talking about things that clients were coming forward and saying that is really needed in this move back to the office environment. And it is looking at things like a zero-touch approach, intelligent experiences, and having the systems that can anticipate. And all of this kind of wraps into the fact that we need to create a safe environment moving forward.
Yeah, and just on the previous one actually, just the systems that anticipate was a really interesting one, because I know one of the examples they gave there was where at the moment, you sort of walk into a meeting room and you've got this kind of one button to push experience where you go in and you can sort of join the meeting. And moving forward, obviously, we're starting to talk about things like Webex Assistant, which I guess we're going to come on to in a second, and just the ability for the assistant to predict that you have a meeting that's about to start, and for you to just agree to join it with your voice rather than having to touch anything. So that obviously has the knock-on impact that it means your meeting's probably more likely to start on time as well, which is kind of nice. But if you needed a delay, you could sort of use natural language processing to say, well, just give me 5 more minutes before joining, and then it will sort of just hold off for 5 minutes before joining. But again, you're not having to touch anything in the office there. So that was one that sort of hit home for me. I was like, yeah, that's a really good use of the technology. And then that leads into zero touch, of course, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think we're going to move into the second part of the webinar now, which is actually we've highlighted 4 questions out of the millions that we could be asking right now to look at. So these are things which we're asking ourselves, our clients are asking us, and we've tried to put a couple of discussion points and talking points around some technology that we are seeing that could help and benefit. Obviously, none of these are set in stone, and we're not saying that these technologies can exactly deliver a solution that will meet government guidelines. So please don't hold us to that directly, but we're just going to talk through some of them. So the first one we have is the challenge of everyone is disparate, and how do we ensure great collaboration? And we touched on a couple of points earlier, one of them being, not compromising on your experience. And James, I think you mentioned about having different packages and home working setups for different requirements. I'm not sure if you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, no. So one of the things that we're doing is we're working with clients at the moment on sort of different packages for home workers. So like the enhanced, the standard, and the premium sort of packages. The view being, with us working at home more and more, that it's not just about in my experience locally actually has an impact on the experience remotely for the people that are joining my meeting. So, what could we do to improve the local experience for those people who are, working out of the office? And not only that, how do we create a solution that encompasses things like employee well-being, communication of what's going on at a business level and news and things like that, the ability to be able to then look at that experience from a central perspective and go, well, what does that experience look like? What kind of quality experience am my workforce kind of having at the moment? So we're looking at we've actually been looking at the Webex Desk Pro and combining that with third-party solutions from our portfolio of partners that we work with to create a kind of an all-encompassing solution for home workers. But not only that, working with IT on the dashboarding side to create visibility into like the employee experience, giving IT the ability to kind of pinpoint perhaps users who've got a worse experience than others, and therefore being able to go to those users and proactively help improve those experiences.
Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously we can only do so much of everybody's setup is different. I'm sat in my lounge at the moment on my dining room table, and my setup is built around here. Some people might have dedicated work areas and offices, and within the home environment everybody has to juggle different challenges. But being able to provision and working with IT to, like you say, almost like prioritize the pain points people are having and look to solve those is a great approach. And obviously, I think Webex has brought in some new features and functionality that is helping us make that experience a little bit more easier.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the slides that I remember was one that said about it providing an experience that's better than being there. And the example they gave was of a sporting event where, obviously if you could, you'd go to every game, but in when you can't go to every single game, then you sort of watch it on TV at home, and actually the experience is almost better than being at the game, because you get, the sort of match stats and all that sort of stuff, and you get the pundits giving you all the extra information, and you get replays and those kind of things, and that's the sort of thing that Cisco's looking at in terms of the working experience, is giving you that better than being there environment. So things like face recognition, so that we've got all these new starters that have joined the organisation, and I've never met them, but actually now that when I join video calls, I can see who they are because they've got little name tags underneath them and those kind of things, and that sort of stuff's really useful. And just getting information in that pre-meeting briefing, so you get a sort of an overview of all the people that are joining the meeting just before the meeting starts. And it's this kind of just-in-time briefing experience that they talk about. And then, moving on, and again, I think we're going to talk about some of these things where, we're using things like natural language understanding to get automatic transcripts and automatic action taking, so that you can sort of get these actions taken during the meeting automatically without you having to really think too hard about it. So applying things like machine learning to the experience to give that better environment for you to sort of have your meetings in. I was just looking through here to see where I had loads of notes on these slides, because there were just so many points and things to talk about in terms of the technology that that was available. Just into, you've got their noise detection and suppression. Just something as simple as that, and being able to, realize when somebody's got a dog barking outside their window, and just sort of realizing that, and then just prompting them to say maybe you should mute or whatever, because there's a lot of noise coming from your end, and those kind of things, and being able to distinguish different types of noise and just sort of gradually mute them out in the background. So if you hear a keyboard typing, you can kind of just mute that out automatically, and those kind of things. So much technology going into it that's sort of hidden in a way. But one of the things that was interesting was they sort of talk about the idea of it all being, all that happening on the client device and not in the cloud. So again, from a security and a privacy perspective, that's obviously really important to make sure that we're not just sending all these sounds up into the cloud to be processed. It's all happening on the client device as well. Because security is such a huge part of the Webex experience. It's super important to Cisco, of course. And I know from a news perspective, there's been a lot of organizations in the news where security hasn't perhaps been forefront of the mind when they're doing these kind of calls and that sort of thing. So that's been super important. But yeah, I could go on forever on that one, so I'll let you carry on.
No, but it is completely true, and even down to like the noise detection, I kind of think back to one of our meeting rooms in Devonshire Square in London, and in the summer when you have the windows open, and our office is sat right near a lovely drinking establishment called the Magpie, and you have that kind of noise and that hustle and bustle on like a Friday, like late afternoon, evening, and being able to isolate that and shut that out moving forward is going to be fantastic. And the last point on here is like maintaining culture and relationships, and that is something which is really important. And we thrive off of interactions with people with body language, and I always say I'm very much a talker with my hands, and I'm here, there, and everywhere, and very animated. And being able to have functionality like having the tiled display within Webex meetings and Webex Teams meetings now, to be able to see everybody that's on the call and not just the isolated person, really helps bring that sense of being in a meeting room. But like you say, almost like better than being there, which is great.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that was Webex also talked about the Webex graph. And so they have this kind of familiarity index, so they know who you communicate with more often perhaps than not. And so they'll give you slightly different information based on who it is you're actually going to be talking to in the meeting that's upcoming, in terms of that sort of daily briefing and that kind of thing. So that was really interesting as well in terms of what's coming up.
Moving on to the next challenge was, how do I ensure meeting rooms are being used safely? So this is a real challenge when thinking about everybody coming back and migrating back into the office eventually. And obviously Cisco and Webex are kind of going ahead of the curve, looking at really what that meeting room experience will be like and how to make it as safe as possible. We have a picture here showing the fact there is now room capacity and monitoring ability and built in, and that is built in across room kits, Webex boards, and even the Desk Pros that James mentioned earlier. That is going to be a real key factor of identifying how a space is being used and if it's being used safely. I suppose the next thing is probably thinking, how do we escalate that and elevate that to the next level?
Yeah, and that screenshot you've got there is from actually a macro that Cisco released, open source macro on their DevNet Code Exchange, where you can sort of I don't know if you can see the text on there, but it's sort of telling you that the room capacity is what the room capacity is and whether that's at the limit or not, and those kind of things. So that's actual code that you can just go and download and just apply to your room systems very easily. So that that's really interesting to me from a development perspective. But yeah, that occupancy information is important because again I was looking at the government guidelines, and section 3.3 says about managing occupancy levels to enable social distancing. So actually, it's an actual government requirement that you manage those occupancy levels. So having that information from not only the room-based endpoints, which is obviously very useful, but also if you've got Meraki or Cisco wireless infrastructure, we can start using those tools as well to be able to kind of work out where those hotspots are, and just making sure that we're not getting too many people in any given space. I think that was all I was going to say on that. But there was a whole bit about the zero-touch approach and Webex Assistant and all those kind of things as well. So yeah, lots to talk about there.
I think also what you mentioned earlier about integrating with AppSpace. So if you reach capacity or you're over capacity in a space, being able to have those automatic alerts which flash up and say, there's too many people in the room, someone's got to go, and having that ability to instantly inform and react to possible unsafe situations. And as well, we have seen a couple of people look at it in the sense that having those room and the space kind of analysis, being able to set up bots to send alerts to say, okay, after this meeting has finished, please can you send in a cleaner, block out time for that cleaning to be undertaken, and then free up the room again within like a calendar system for people to use. And I think that is really powerful as well, to use technology almost passively, so you don't have to think about, have I informed someone that I finished my meeting, and have I done the right things to make sure that I am ensuring a safe and clean workspace. It's automatically done for you, so it's removing a little bit of that human error as well. And looking at zero touch, so zero touch is something which I think a lot of us will be hearing a lot of. And it comes in lots of different forms, doesn't it? So, whether, like you said, using voice activation when you walk into a meeting room and saying, hi, Webex, start my meeting, or even down to just like having the proximity ability to screen share and not have to plug in a cable into your laptop, or as we often find, finding a little adapter to plug into the cable to plug into your laptop. It removes all of that faff as well, so saving you time as well as the interactions. And I think that is something which businesses will have to look at. And all of this technology already exists, and it can be rolled out and implemented along with the collaboration tools people are used to using. So that adoption process should be quite straightforward and fast, really.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always forget about the proximity capability of sort of being able to, the stuff that you can already do today that we've been using for months and months, where you can sort of just join a meeting room system from your mobile device and those kind of things. I always think about the digital assistant that they're sort of adding into Webex coming, it's coming soon, I guess. I don't know what the release dates are of these things, but yeah, Webex Assistant is kind of, everybody's familiar now with home assistants and voice assistants that they use in the home to sort of add tuner, which bizarrely you still can't get to your shopping list nice and easily. You can then start applying that to your meeting room experience. So you can sort of say things like, who's the account manager for this particular customer, and then you could sort of ask it to add that person into the meeting and those kind of things, and being able to add your own capabilities to that voice assistant built in to the endpoints and to the desktop client and those kind of things, which is it's going to be really interesting to see coming along.
And that builds into the whole smart workspace. I know that there are lots of jazzy things you can do, like with voice, with that virtual assistant voice options. Change the blinds, change the lighting. Can you order in another round of refreshments and things like that, which again feeds into this zero touch approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the next challenge we kind of addressing are I'm having to change my office design setup, and what can I do to get the best use of space safely? And this is something which we've heard quite a lot on the TV, and we've seen people going in with the the famous yellow and black tape, marking out 2 meter boxes and how much space does that actually equate to in your office environment and your floor plan. And one thing I know us as Matilic, we were looking to move towards a more hot desk approach without office space. But it is almost a bit of like, the end of the hot desk now, isn't it? It's not something which can viably or safely be used in practice.
Yeah, and again, looking at the guidelines, it specifically calls that out, and it says that workstations should be assigned to an individual and not shared. If they need to be shared, they should be shared by the smallest possible number of people. And then it says, it goes on to say, avoiding the use of hot desks and spaces where not possible, for example, call centers or training facilities, cleaning and sanitizing workstations between different occupants, including shared equipment. So that definitely makes the whole shared space much more difficult. And I think it's really important to sort of have those as bookable resources now as one way of being able to tackle that. So we're certainly looking at adding all of our hot desks as bookable resources. And clearly we've got to start moving those desks apart a little bit, or putting kind of screens in between them, or maybe, just not allowing people to sit at every other desk or something like that, and certainly not sitting opposite each other. You're supposed to sit back to back and all these kinds of things. So there's a whole bunch of guidelines around all that. So that definitely makes it much more difficult from a hot desking perspective. So yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of thought put into that, and how we can make sure that those spaces are sanitized. You book it for the day potentially, and when you've left, it goes into sort of a red mode where nobody else can really use that until that's been sanitized or whatever. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to tackle that.
And I think one of the things people think, oh, this is all new, procedures, and you talk about like a bookable system and think, oh, it's another kind of gate and things I need to consider. But all of this can be integrated into the collaboration tools that everybody uses every day. So having calendar bots like put in, and being able to ask, where is the nearest like available desk and things like that. So I think it's important to make sure that there's a bit of an education about how the collaboration tools can be used to facilitate this new change.
Yeah, definitely. The bot integrations is a really interesting one, because obviously we've done a reasonable amount of work around bot integrations. I know, earlier in sort of tail end of last year, we did an integration where we had we had some face recognition, which would recognize people as they arrived in the office, and then it would message them on Webex Teams to sort of tell them where their colleagues were, for example. But just being able to sort of use a bot to sort of find meeting spaces which are less crowded, or those kind of things, is certainly something we would be looking at doing, and we have some of that functionality today. We already kind of had some of that capability, but it just sort of modifying it slightly to make it a bit more appropriate for today, really. And I think we're coming onto it, but adding additional tools with sort of wayfinding and those kind of things, which would be really interesting. I'm not going to talk about that because I think you got it on your next slide. So.
Don't spoil the surprise. And I know, James, I know we had a conversation actually about this image that is on the slide here, and flexible use of spaces, and all the different different options and capabilities and the agility required to make sure that we are getting the most from the office space and using it safely.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real challenge you've got ahead of us, isn't it, is we talk about the next normal as if actually we'll end up being back in some kind of stable working environment. And as you've seen already, very much with likes of Leicester City, and also places like Beijing, and also in Germany, that hotspots and flares of the epidemic may drive people to have to change and be flexible with the social distancing within their own offices, perhaps, once we do start getting back into the office, and so having a solution which can seamlessly and easily scale based on changing government guidelines is really important.
And moving on to probably like the last challenge we're going to cover today is, what can I do to protect my people and my visitors? A lot of us, we look at what we can do internally for our business, but then also we have to think about, to keep business going, we're going to have to deal with clients or with contractors on site, and what can we do there? And we touched on the zero-touch approach earlier, but tying in a bit more of that visitor management could be important. So creating, if you have to go onto a site, and making sure that PPE, the correct PPE is worn, being able to use Meraki cameras to identify those, and then send alerts to maybe floormen or staff or signage to say, hang on a second, make sure you've got everything on and everybody's protected, or even down to having a zero-touch reception-based kiosk where you can send an alert to who you're meeting and say, I'm here, I'm in the lobby, ready for our meeting. And I know on this image here, we can see a bit of a heat map in regards to a floor plan. And we spoke, Darren, you almost spot surprise on the wayfinding and looking at how we can support, one-way systems going into offices.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about sort of notifying people that your visitors here and those kind of things. And those solutions already exist as part of Webex Teams today. There are integrations for those kind of things already today, which we've been able to use. And the one that you show there, is the wayfinding. And that the particular one that you're showing there is a partner, Cisco partner, and a partner of ours that has the ability to register who your colleagues are and things like that, so where your colleagues are in the building, and you can sort of find colleagues and those kind of things. But as you mentioned, also being able to specify one-way routes where you might arrive somewhere in one way and then leave somewhere from another direction. And the other thing it actually allows you to do is have things like QR codes. So somebody could just scan a QR code, which means they're not touching it, which is great, and then it would show them the route to go from where they are to where they need to be. So that's great for visitors, especially in large campus environments and those kind of things where you scan that QR code and then you're getting that blue dot experience inside the building to navigate your way around, whilst also perhaps trying to avoid those hotspots and those kind of things, which is obviously important.
Yeah, I think that would also be really useful for if you started an organisation during lockdown and you were coming back into the office and you have no reference point of an office building or site, and you say to someone, how do I get, even just having this type of technology to support you on your day one into the office would be really useful. And the last point on here is trust in the cloud to enable zero trust. And one thing we found has been quite a popular approach is moving things like calling. So your calling ability, moving to a cloud calling approach with Webex as part of your whole holistic Webex solution, and being able to eliminate the need for desk phones. So removing that whole piece of having a piece of equipment required to put very close to your face and having to clean in between intermittently. And you can utilize cloud-based solutions like cloud calling to eliminate that. And those are technologies which are there now, completely up and running, ready for people to use. Okay, so I think we kind of covered the four main topics we were going to today. I think this is a slide we put together about having the importance of having that holistic, cohesive collaboration tooling to support your the different challenges we might face. So you have your meetings, your calling, your WebEx devices, the teams, all controlled by the Control Hub, which is a wonderful single platform for the IT and the infrastructure, your infrastructure teams to utilize. But then it's looking at factoring in wayfinding, bots, employee pulse, and the new Cisco headsets for better audio and meeting experiences, and making sure that we're dovetailing in the solutions that are there, the technology that is there, ready to go, so that we can have a fully supported, collaborative way when we move into that next normal. I'm not sure, guys, if you have any closing thoughts for today.
I was going to say that.
Not from my side, no.
Yeah, no, I was, same for me, really. I mean, you mentioned something there that just reminded me of something I was going to say earlier around the headset. So I noticed that Cisco is going to be using DECT and wired for their headsets versus Bluetooth. This is getting really into the weeds now, but that's really great for me because I'm not a fan of Bluetooth devices, and I think as people start going back to the office and they start using headsets more because they're on video calls more, using Bluetooth devices in an office space is going to become more and more challenging because of that, overlap of frequencies and those kind of things. And so yeah, that's something that's been good to see Cisco doing, is maintaining that kind of DECT quality. But yeah, that's totally getting in the weeds around that. But in terms of the overall approach, yeah, I agree with you. I think just having all of those things put together, like Jane said, package those things up so that you're sort of dealing in outcomes rather than these point solutions is really important, and just making sure that we're just doing the right thing for our people, right? Safety is the number one priority, I think.
Yeah, and also like whilst Darren was talking there, it reminded me of something that someone said around this situation where we talk about the next normal, but actually maybe it's better to say it's the next strange, because who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 months, right?
I like that. Definitely should be coining that phrase. Okay, and obviously we have quite a few people on today. Are there any questions? Do we have there's a chat and Q&A functionality on the sidebar there if anybody has any questions. We have put together actually a little booklet which takes you through some of the latest feature and functionality releases on Cisco Webex, which will be available. It's on the resources page of our natilic.com website. And you can have a look because there'll be some features and functionality already pre-built in that you can switch on today and start utilising, start benefiting from having blur backgrounds in meetings and utilising the Webex Assistant functionality to gain that extra insight when you're having meetings with people you may not have met yet. Okay, well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us on this Webex today, in this webinar. There'll be a series coming out over the next couple of months as we look at how the landscape and the situation changes and how technology can help us support through it. Thank you.
Thanks, Hayley.
Great stuff. Thank you, Hayley.